Hey there, friends. Today I want to talk about the myth of doing enough. That there's this sort of kind of arbitrary threshold of movement or exercise beyond which you have to go in order to be doing anything beneficial for your health. First of all, I think that the history of these guidelines is problematic because it's specific to a population that isn't experiencing necessarily other chronic conditions. And so there were kind of aerobic guidelines set for 75 to 150 minutes that were associated with preventing cardiovascular events. And so people kind of stick to this as a guideline. And so often people feel like they have to do an hour or 2 hours of exercise in order to be doing enough. And then obviously, as women in the perimenopause years, there's a lot of pressure to do resistance training, which is important for preventing bone loss and so on. However, even when they reviewed the guidelines, they found that adherence to these is extremely low. It is just very, very difficult for humans in our modern world to keep up with the expectations of hours and hours of exercise. And I believe that there is some problematic weight stigma underlying the guidelines to begin with, because many people will lean on these as a recommendation related to intentional weight loss, which, as we know, is not only not possible in the long term, but also just extremely damaging from a mental health perspective for people who feel like they have to shrink their bodies in order to be of value. So all of these things, when we're trying to look at like how do I make sure I'm doing enough movement, creates lots of really complicated questions. And the population that I work with, which is mostly people who have other chronic conditions related to or maybe unrelated to pain, is that there's a whole nother, like a whole number of symptoms that have nothing to do with pain that can actually really be triggered by exercising more than a small amount or too much. So, for example, fatigue, depletion of energy, depression, inflammation. We don't want to exercise to the point where if you have long COVID, for example, you now don't have the ability to go to the grocery store and get your food because you've just kind of depleted all of your energy and stamina. We need to be able to kind of incrementally draw upon our energy resources as our overall kind of plan for the day. And so it's super unproductive and unhelpful to try to aim for a specific amount. And to be really honest with you, so there's this kind of standard in the Pilates world of sessions being an hour long. I don't know where that comes from. I've had super effective sessions with personal trainers that were 40, 45, even 30 minutes long. I've had fantastic mat classes that were 30 minutes long. I've also had great sessions that were multiple hours long with like learning in between. So I think that we have to stop expecting that there is a certain kind of, bar that we have to meet, and we have to work within the confines of what's good for us. And so I really advocate in my own business around a smaller or shorter session that is very targeted, that is very full, that has no fluff in it. So we keep up the movement and keep the brain moving the whole time. It's much easier in a shorter session to be focused on your body, to really pay attention the whole time to what's happening in your body. You start getting into longer sessions, the mind wanders. It's just a lot of attention for one person to put on one thing for the whole time. And also, it leaves room for conversation and chit chat and digression. I would rather have a focus session that allows my clients to be working on a very specific goal, getting in and out and moving on with their day so that it feels achievable and that there's that kind of ownership that happens. And I've really seen this over the years that I've been in business. When I made the sessions shorter, people's outcomes got better. And that's because they started feeling more capable as they walked out. They started taking the lessons that they were learning in their bodies and applying them to things they were doing on a daily basis, which just made the gains go faster. And, there was a sense of like not having to kind of work around trying to fit a very long session into your day in a difficult way. It is always better to do things more consistently than to do them once or not at all. And I think that we just really need to move away from recommending a certain, threshold of exercise as being, sufficient to matter, because it all matters. Every single minute that you spend moving your body matters on all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally, and everything like that. So, yeah, I would say less is actually more when it comes to movement because when you allow it to be bite-sized and fit into your life, you're more likely to do it again. And that is where we start to have adaptation in the brain and body when we have consistency. So that's my 2 cents on that. See you next week.